So the next thing I'm going to talk about right now is becoming a strategist, which is a very, very important aspect of everything that I'm discussing today. So I went ahead and asked ChatGPT who a strategist is, right? And so here are some of the things ChatGPT said about who a strategist is, which I think is very correct, by the way. A strategist is a professional who is responsible for creating, implementing, and managing strategies for an organization, right? That's one of the important things. Then strategists can work in a variety of industries and sectors, including business, politics, military, and sports. To become a strategist, there is no specific educational or professional background required. So, I mean, this is a very big advantage for anybody who wants to become a strategist today, is that you don't have to become, you don't have to have any specific prior knowledge. The mindset of a strategist sometimes, like you might be very inclined as a strategist, even without being a strategist officially. And I think that's a very big and good opportunity for anybody that, wants to be a strategist. So, however, it's very useful if you have some background knowledge. For instance, if you've been in marketing, business, or finance, for instance, many times all of those, or even management consulting, all of those field of area of studies have some similar principles that they work by. They have some similar skill sets that are relevant to the practice of strategy. So if you have any of these as a background, it helps significantly, in becoming a strategist. Now, there is this approach I use anytime I want to teach anything. Sometimes I teach about design and, all sorts of other things. So I feel like there are 3 layers to learning anything. So first of all, you need to learn the mindset. And I think the mindset is the most foundational thing that is important to learn, right? The mindset first, the skill set next, and then the tool set, right? So mindset is the foundation. On top of that, you start to acquire knowledge and skill set. And then right on top of that is tools and techniques, right? So what happens, however, is that most people start from the top. They start by learning tools and skill sets, okay? And as much as that can be useful in getting you started, it's not the best approach to learning anything, because tools and techniques will change with time, with technology, and then if that is what you are used to, you might find yourself becoming irrelevant too quickly. But once you have the right mindset and you have the right knowledge and skill set, you can always adopt or adapt to any new tool or technique. Talking about mindset right now, and when it comes to the mindset of a strategist, I think for me, becoming a strategist is synonymous to being a polymath. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the word polymath or you've heard anything like that before, right? So a polymath is more or less someone that you can refer to as a generalist. Sometimes people call them Renaissance man. So that's who a polymath is. Let's investigate that a little bit further. So yeah, I mean, I know that in the last 2 years, especially 2 years ago, there was a lot of conversation around, should I become a generalist or should I become a specialist? And different people have varied opinions about that. But in the context of becoming a strategist, I would say that becoming a generalist is way more practical and applicable. So A polymath, as this definition here says, is someone who has a wide breadth of skills and knowledge, but also has deep expertise in a number of different areas, right? So let's take that again. You have a wide breadth of skills and knowledge, and then you have deep expertise in one thing. So you might be someone who is very, very interested in fashion, and then you are deeply into it, like every and anything that you need to know about fashion. But then a little bit about graphic design, a little bit about marketing, a little bit about business, a little bit about law, a little bit about politics, all of those things put together kind of help to form who you are, basically, right? And this brings me to, like, an example of myself, right? I didn't set out to become a strategist at all. I didn't set out to become a strategist. What I had in mind was that I just had a mindset that I don't want to be boxed. I felt like I had the capacity to create value and create impact beyond what I studied in school. Because what I studied in school meant that I needed to apply myself in a specific way and solve specific type of problems. And the truth is that that was just not how I was thinking. Yes, like I said, I wanted to try everything, right? And that's why I became a strategist. I was trying to, oh, Dame Ladi asked what I studied in school. So I studied architecture in school. Yes, that's what I studied in school. And I mean, I believe that for me, I could apply everything I've learned about architecture in all sorts of other ways, instead of, just helping to design spaces, right? So I was fascinated by, or I realized I was fascinated by excellence more than anything, right? Something that always made me feel alive or come alive is when I saw that things were actually done properly, and maybe, I was more fascinated by it because of the climate that we are in, Nigeria, Nigeria is more or less like, we have a culture of mediocrity. We have like a standard culture of mediocrity, right? So whenever I saw anything being done and done properly, I was, always very fascinated. You always made me come alive. Yeah, Shiva. Oh, Lord. Okay, yeah, so I felt like excellence was what I was interested in. I wanted to see excellence happen in every way that excellence can possibly happen. Because if you think about it, nothing exists in isolation. You need to, if you want to deliver excellence, it means that excellence has to be present in all the components of whatever you are trying to do. And that's what my own fascination was. And therefore, I realized becoming a strategist gave me the opportunity to be able to influence several components of things coming together so I can deliver excellence. So that was the mindset for me in becoming a strategist. Okay, so but here was the puzzle I needed to solve for myself, right? So the puzzle I had to solve for myself is, how do I leave great impact on the world and have a great life for myself? Those were the two important things I needed to solve for. One, how do I leave a great impact on the world, and how do I have a great life for myself? So for me, what this meant was having the freedom to fulfill my potential, because I saw myself as someone who had like multi-potential. Like, I could do a lot of things, very well, and I was interested in doing things very well. So I needed to figure this out, and strategy was more or less the answer for me. For some people, they set out to become strategists because they saw someone else, become a strategist, right? And yes, I remember in the sign up form, I asked, what inspired you to become a strategist, or what inspired you to be interested in strategy? And I realized also that from the answers I got, there were so many people that were inspired because someone, saw something in them or pointed out, oh, like, you seem to have a particular way of thinking and approaching problem, or you seem to have a specific worldview. Maybe this concept of strategy might actually be a very good and useful endeavor. So I want you to put in the comments here, why did you become a strategist, or what was your inspiration to becoming a strategist? Please share that in the comments right here. I want to see if you are going to have some more interesting answers. Okay, so I have one. I became a strategist because I'm naturally curious and seek ways to solve problems. So that's excellent. I enjoy solving problems in diverse ways. Very valid. I enjoy solving problems. Okay, so at least we have two answers. Okay, Shiba says more control over the expected result of anything. Yeah, accurate. I like that. Kimberly says, I'm not a strategist, but I'd love to manage brands better. Okay, that's still a very good starting point. Okay, design especially. So I wanted to do more with brand design, be more intentional about it. Okay, that's very valid. The desire to be intentional about achieving a general, I'll put goal there, with close focus. I have a problem with the intentionality part. Okay, that's a very good admittance. We'll see if we can fix some of that along the program. So strategy is an integral part of human life. I agree with you. I became strategist because I always been attracted to complex and creative aspect of business. That's interesting. Let me read the last one here. I'm interested in strategy to sort organization crisis I have with myself and rebrand myself. Okay, excellent. Okay, so I mean, almost all of us have something similar about our way of looking at the world and how strategy speaks to that. So there are two key philosophies that for the longest time has actually impacted how my view of the world. And so this is one of my favorite quotes from Leonardo da Vinci. Some of you are familiar with who Leonardo da Vinci is. So he says, learn how to see, right? I mean, what does that really mean? Like learning how to see? Like, why do you need to learn how to see? Don't you already have your pair of eyes, and don't you already see things every other day? Well, I think this might be talking about something else entirely. So the complete version of the quote says, learn how to see, realize that everything connects to everything else. So, like I said, this is one of my favorite quotes and a philosophy that drives how I see everything. So I think for a fact that everything is connected to everything else. So when you think about everything that happens to you and everything that happens in the world, if you're able to look very carefully and think very carefully, none of these things are happening in isolation exactly, even if they look like they're happening in isolation. There's a connection that always, bring about any impact or change that happens. Okay. And that is one of the things that you have to bear in mind as a strategist. You have to learn how to see. That is definitely one philosophy that has, been driving my own thinking. Another philosophy, however, is this philosophy by Miyamoto Musashi. So Miyamoto Musashi is a warrior, and if you think about the example of Sun Tzu and a lot of all these people, when it comes to strategy, I think one particular part of life that strategy has not been despised is in the military, because that is a matter of life and death, and winning is, the stakes are way too high for you to lose, right? And by the way, like we said, when it comes to strategy, you have to determine or define exactly what winning is to you. Sometimes winning is not about killing your opponent. Sometimes winning is about having your opponent come to an agreement with you. Sometimes winning is having your opponent surrender or decide not to fight. Winning is not always, what everybody term as beating or defeating the other person. But, that's just another digression. The most important thing here is to point out that if you know the way broadly, you will see it in everything. If you know the way broadly, you see it in everything. I would have loved to hear each of your thoughts or interpretation of these quotes, but we may not have all of that time. But I'll ask you a question very soon. So my understanding of this is that, like the previous quote I just shared with you, everything is connected to everything else if you learn how to see. So I realized that sometimes the same principles that apply to one particular subject, if you start to understand another subject very carefully, you see that at the beneath that is similar principles. Similar principles actually applies. Exactly similar principle applies. And what happens when you get to that point is that you start to unlock your ability to interpret things properly, more accurately, because you've opened like your sixth eye or your third eye, like some people would say. And this, for instance, has also influenced how I've approached teaching any subject, at any point. I don't like to teach technique like, oh, this is how you do it. You just have to apply this, do this, and you get this result. Because you might be put in a situation where that particular approach would not work. But when you learn about something in a very broad way, you'll be able to bring that broad understanding into like a very contextual, you'll be able to apply it in a contextual manner. Do you understand? So, and that is a very essential mindset that a strategist should always have. By the way, so I'm going to ask you, in everything, in your maybe 18 years of existence, 25 years of existence, however old you are, what are the two things that you have discovered in this life that they are two different things, or they seem like they are different, but you think they function by the same principle, or you think there's a general pattern that is the pattern that they operate by is similar? I want you to put it down in the comment now. I'm sure that one or two things, at least in this life, has occurred to you that, okay, there seems to be a similarity between how this works and how this works. Maybe I should give you an example in my own case. I realized that the principles of design apply to almost everything in life. The principles of design are very applicable to writing as well. Very, very, very applicable. So, proximity, for instance, putting things that are similar together. Contrast, for instance, as a principle of design, you can use contrast in writing to create tension, right? To create tension and to create interest. Do you get? So I've just given you an example now that if you understand design properly, and all those principles of design, you can unlock it in almost any other thing. So yes, okay. Ezra said in finance. So please tell me, finance and what? What is the other subject that you think shares a similar principle with finance, for instance? So most social justice movement, they have a similar theme beneath them. If you look very closely, many of them thrive on promoting that you are the victim for the most part. I mean, we can debate on that, but that's not the essence of this. But if you think about most of the social justice, oh, this group of people are the victim and these people are the oppressors, there is always every critical theory, for instance, there's always an oppressor and a victim. Oh, men are oppressing women, white people are oppressing black people. Which other example? I don't think Igbo and Yoruba in this place entirely is still entirely follows. But like it's very similar when you think about the pattern of like what society quarrels about. Okay, psychology and marketing, okay. Literature and normal interaction with humans. That's very interesting. The need to read between and beyond visible lines. Okay, engineering and design, I totally agree. Yes. In amassing wealth, you need to give out to gain more. And another aspect of life, you need to share what you have to get another. Awesome. Excellent. Okay, so thank you for your contributions. This makes a lot of sense. So as a strategist, like I said, you need to actually be of this mind. You're constantly seeking to understand the principles beneath how things work. So how things work is your most, is what you hunger for every single time. Okay, so I'm seeing another one. Different industries and companies have unique challenges and opportunities, but they all require similar strategic thinking to succeed. I'll have loved you to elaborate on that anyway. But let's see, maybe when we get to the question and answer part. All right, so moving on. As a strategist, I think there are so many things that underpins the mindset of a strategist and that will generally help you to become a better strategist. But one thing, or three of the things I've been able to break down here is number one is curiosity, which I think is the biggest and most important attribute. The second is courage. And then finally is empathy. So I'm not going to talk so much about empathy because it's the least important in my own view. For curiosity and courage. So let's talk about curiosity and courage. Becoming a strategist has to do with how you look at the world, right? So if becoming a strategist has to do with how you look at the world, and that means that you are shaping the world through an objective understanding of the world around you and how it functions. Okay? So, and the only way for you to be able to understand the world that you live in to start with is by actually, having the curiosity to experience, to, search for knowledge and to try to expand your horizon on, how things work, how things connect. Because like we established, when you start to unlock all of this understanding, it will influence the quality of approach you have towards like getting any desired outcome. Do you understand? So yes, you have to remain a child, more or less. You have to look at everywhere and look at everything. That's the famous saying that curiosity kills the cat. I mean, why did curiosity kill the cat? Maybe he went too far in trying to find out what he should not be bothered finding out. But that's literally is that childhood spirit where a child is constantly trying to understand things in the most innocent way. No arrogance, void of arrogance, void of assumption. Just like, okay, a child can ask you, why is water wet? Many adults would think that is a very stupid and irrational question. But the interesting thing is that most adults don't even have an answer to that question in reality. So in that case, like you say, the one with the question many times is smarter than the one with the answer or the assumed answer. So yes, you have to remain curious. Like curiosity you have to preserve that inner child within you that wants to see everything. I'll give you an example, and I know many of you can relate. When I was much younger, and I would like you to give your example here as well. When I was much younger, I was fascinated by drums. So when I see people playing drums, I always wondered, what is inside that drum? In my mind, there were a few people inside the drum that were actually making that sound happen. I didn't believe that it was the drummer that was actually just kicking and making the sound happen. I felt like when he kicked, there were people inside that drum that responded before, and I mean, that's the level of curiosity. When we were young, I know some of you took your toys apart because you felt like, how come this car is running? So I want you to tell me what, maybe as a child or even as an adult, what have you been very curious about that you maybe even feel stupid for your innocent curiosity? Please tell me in the comment. Bio says, who used to off the lights in the fridge whenever you close the door? Innocent curiosity. But yeah, while I wait for your response, like I said, you have to become a student of life. You have to enrich your views and develop unique perspective to problems and opportunities. Okay, so yes, so you must have an undying curiosity. Like you must remain a child. Like you cannot afford to assume that you know anything. So there's a level of confidence you have that you have a reasonable understanding of how many other things work, and you can use that understanding to unlock anything new. But you don't make assumptions as to like how those things are working. Do you get? Someone says how certain foods were discovered, how people had to die to discover certain veggies were poisonous. Experiment. That's not a type of, it's good curiosity anyway. At least the world benefits from it. How people felt when they died. I remember always asking my dad. That's such a genius genius thing to think about. Like there's this Billie Eilish song that talks about like when we all fall asleep, where do we go? Very interesting anyway. But I mean, some of these things actually have answers. But the funny thing is that most people, especially as you grow older, you start to assume that things just exist because they exist and they are magical or miraculous, and it's beyond your ability to understand and capture. And if you think like that, you would limit the realm where you can be useful and valuable. So for instance, as someone who is a strategist, sometimes I interact with maybe a founder whose business I know nothing about. Maybe I've not read anything, I've not heard anything about whatsoever, right? But the beauty in that is I have the curiosity to uncover. I like to figure things out. And that same curiosity, I can bring it to unlock and learn new things. Do you get? So you have to be able to, fuel and drive your curiosity. So I think I've overemphasized the idea of curiosity here. So the second thing is courage, right? So courage, so being a strategist means having the courage to think deliberately and deeply about what you want to create and what you want to achieve. Why do I think courage is such an important thing? Because if you think about it, strategic people think before they act. Like we established, strategy is a theory, and there's no entire guarantee that you will win. But you need to have the courage to say, okay, I've deliberately taken the time to think deeply about this, and I have to take action based on my theory of how this is going to work out, right? So it definitely requires that you have courage. And this is one of the reasons why many strategists have like what they call imposter syndrome. Because sometimes you are the one at the center of everything. For instance, if you give a business a direction, you say like, you know what, this is your entire business. Stop doing this, start doing this. Imagine that what you tell them to start doing eventually fails or doesn't get them the outcome you predicted it to get them. You know, many of us don't like to fail. And that's another thing about, you know, courage. You have to be willing to fail because, you know, your point of view about failure is very different. Failure is not an end in itself. Failure is an event that helps you to refine and regenerate your, sharpens your understanding of how things actually work. So for you, failure is, you know, another opportunity to learn and be smarter. But for the average person, you know, the average person is afraid to fail. But as a strategist, you cannot be afraid to fail. And the antidote to your fear of failure is the deliberateness and the depth of your thinking. So you're not just afraid to fail because you don't care about failure and you feel like whether you fail or not, it doesn't matter, I will learn my lesson. No, you still, however, you know, do your due diligence in making sure that you put your best foot forward, okay? So another thing about courage is strategists are people who are very optimistic. You know, they have an optimistic spirit and a very positive outlook on themselves and the world, and they expect the best. You know, you have to have that attitude, because if you don't have an optimistic attitude about yourself, first of all, you will not have the courage to like lead other people and say, okay, this is what you need to do, or this is how you need to go about this, you know. And then you need to also have an optimistic view about the world. That means, you know, everything is going this way, but things are possible. New things can happen, things can change, you know, and then you need to expect the best, you know. So you have to have that mindset. You know, don't forget we're talking about mindset of a strategist right now. And beyond that, you know, you have the courage to accept responsibility and even for the actions of other people, not just for your own actions. You know, it doesn't work if you want to just say, oh, I just said you should do this, so, and then, you know, you did this and you did this, or you did not do this as much as I asked you to do it. You know, that's being defensive. As a strategist, your job is not to be defensive because you need to be proactive. It's a proactive mindset. You are not reactive. You're supposed to be able to look at how things can possibly work out or happen, and then, you know, take actions or make plans in accordance in a way that will put you at an advantage. So courage cannot be overemphasized, like I've talked about. And I think that is all I have to say about mindset. Yeah, I've talked about resilience, you know, learning from failure. Yes, being optimistic about yourself. You know, one of the things that made me become a strategist is one time I thought about, okay, if I go and get a very high paying job, right, I could easily be paid something reasonable compared to other people. And this was many years ago, you know, not now that everybody has tech job and they are being showered dollars all over the place. I'm interested in that. Anyways, but I thought about it, I was like, what if I walk into, instead of getting a job in Shell, for instance, then Shell or all these oil companies used to be the, you know, pinnacle of, you know, high income earners, you know. So I was like, okay, the best thing, maybe I get a job in one of these oil companies now. They are going to pay me something very nice. But how about I walk into that office with an idea that is going to solve a very important problem for them or unlock a new opportunity for them? First of all, I'll be able to create more value and I'll be able to be compensated better because I'm able to create value in that sense. So this also has to do with the idea of like having a very positive view of yourself. Like I can actually create value from nothing. I can look at an environment or an establishment and say, you know what, this thing that is working, it can improve significantly. And this is how I think it can improve. Or you can look at something that is a problem and say, this thing that is a problem, this is what I can do to improve or solve for it. Okay, so like I was saying, the three attributes that would help a strategist, the three key attributes are curiosity, courage, and then empathy. So for the empathy part, okay, so I'll talk about that, briefly. So empathy, you have to be genuine about your interest in everything. By the way, I think many people misunderstand empathy. Empathy is actually a tool. Empathy is not about emotions. And one of the reasons why the internet is uncontrollably emotional today is because, to a great extent, we believe that, what's the English now? Aligning with how people feel is a sign of being a good human being. It's actually not true, because empathy is not about helping people feel like they are victims. Empathy is you putting yourself, is like we've been talking about, strategic thinking now. If I want to understand something or I want to understand someone, like, okay, let me take example of the last comment that we have in this chat. The person says, how were certain foods discovered? How many people had to die to discover certain veggies were poisonous? Now, it takes empathy to be able to think that way, right? Now, this person is not necessarily trying to say, oh, like, everybody that died, what a pity, So that's sympathy. There is sympathy, and being sympathetic is not necessarily a bad thing, but empathy is, the ability to consider what it would be to be in a particular situation so that you can understand it, right? So the goal of empathy is to be able to understand and give practical solutions. So that's another very important skill that you need to have. Empathy is not about deciding not to fat shame people, even though I think, it's onto you as you choose to behave. But when it comes to being a strategist, I think empathy is even is both relevant to diversity and also relevant to courage, right? With a right amount of empathy, you would be able to, you have enough curiosity to be able to unlock and understand what exists with a different group of people or a particular solution you might not be used to. And then with courage, empathy can actually help you consider how other people feel, what their needs are, what their wants are, and even in face of difficulty, make attempts to try to solve or resolve for that. Do you understand? Empathy is sitting with a businessman and understanding, how difficult it has been for him to pay his employees, how difficult, some policies from Emefiele has impacted on his business model, blah, blah, blah. It takes empathy to be able to actually sit down and listen to someone else and understand them. But what that empathy is doing is not to sympathize with them and say, oh, sorry, I wish it was better, I wish it was different. It's to be able to uncover the situation properly and then move ahead to solve it. Do you get? So yeah, so those are the 3 key attributes that I think a strategist should have. So I'm going to ask you now to put in the comment, of all these 3 attributes, which one do you think you lack and which one do you think you are very excellent at? Okay. Someone said, I lack courage. I have some empathy and some curiosity. Okay. Please, what are the 3? I missed out. Okay, so we have curiosity, we have courage, and we have empathy. Curiosity, courage, and empathy. Okay. Can you repeat the question? So my question is, of these 3 things, curiosity, courage, and empathy, which I say are the attributes of a good strategist or becoming a great strategist, which one do you lack and which one do you think you have? Or someone here is saying, I lack adequate knowledge and has affected my courage. I don't think knowledge entirely needs to inform your courage. Courage is courage, even in the face of ignorance. Like you decide that you want to do something and you're like, okay, I'll go for it. And courage is the willingness to accept failure ahead of failure. So if you decide to do something and then you fail, you have the courage to accept it. So the reason why most people are not courageous is because they don't want to fail. I don't think knowledge should be the reason why you don't have courage. I think it's that you're actually afraid to fail. Maybe you even know too much. Okay, I love to not think sometimes. Ignorance is bliss, yes. Okay, someone has courage 90%. Mary, excellent. Empathy can deprive you from taking rational. Okay, I'm reading more comments. Empathy should be linked to sympathy. Okay, let's see now. We are going to figure that out right now. Empathy can deprive you from taking rational decisions sometimes. Okay, so let's talk about this briefly before we move to the next section. So empathy can deprive you from thinking rationally. So let me actually check the definition of empathy first of all. So I'm not talking from my head. What is empathy? Empathy is the ability to understand and share the feeling of another. And so as simple as that. Yes, sympathy is a synonym of empathy, yes. Okay, so let me explain this to you. Sympathy and empathy are linked, definitely. They are synonyms. But I'm trying to talk about the quality of empathy for a strategist right now. So imagine you're talking to a business owner and he's like, someone broke my heart. I've not been paying attention to work for a while. I've been sad and blah, blah, blah. And you sympathize with the person and you say something like, okay, you know what? What's going to make you feel better right now? What will make you have focus? And the person tells you that, okay, I just want the person to come back. I want the person who broke my heart to apologize and then we can continue the relationship we have. And you know for a fact that that relationship was toxic, right? So you going ahead to advise the person or helping the person get what they want back might actually be the wrong answer that the person needs. But because you were buying into their emotions too much, you then start to give like solutions that are not practical or that are not going to help the person Exactly. But what you could do, for instance, as a strategist is saying, okay, I understand how you feel. Take some time, and get over it, recover, see a therapist, talk to a friend, go out and have fun, do other things, get your mind to, be occupied by other things and come back to work. So this might not be a perfect example, but what I just try to illustrate here now is that sympathy will make you sometimes blinded to why you're even talking to the person in the first place. Don't forget that what you're trying to do is you're trying to help someone make progress. You're trying to help them become the best and better version of themselves towards the future. So if you are preoccupied with how they feel in the moment, you are going to validate how they feel, number one, and then sometimes how they feel might not might not even be accurate, might just be predicated on other things that are not even in your own control. And feelings are fickle, like we all know. Feelings are not always the true representation of what is happening. So, and that's why I emphasize that empathy is a tool to help you understand the situation. But ultimately, when you understand the situation, your goal is to move the person forward and further. And sometimes it might require that you do things that are not very palatable. So I hope I've been able to make that clarification.